Let
to.
me let me start recording here. So this is the pre-show, and let me share. I got a couple things to show you, and let me share this with us. And let me start here. Okay, so I started thinking going into the playoffs coming up, week 15, 16, 17. I was curious about kind of the league, what's going on, how's things been going? Is there anything that will tell me, is anything changing? Is there something in a big way, right at the top, the landscape? So what you're seeing is each week I calculated each team's PPR per snap scoring. Everybody who contributed anything, each team got an average, and I took the average of the averages, and that's what you're seeing with the red circles and the 13-week average is the pink level 0.188, and the trend line is in blue, and you can look at week 1 and you can see week 13, and you can see the journey we've been on, Dennis. And so lots of things happen when you look at this. Is there something weird about this year? Look at week 1, 2, maybe even 3 starting to get close to the average, but weeks 1 and 2, is every year like this? How do we, if so, then we need to maybe deal with it accordingly. Expect the unexpected, right? I mean, like tight ends, we know, and this data, I've showed you different versions, that there were definitely issues with the tight end, and that's going to affect a team's overall performance. And I will also note the trend line has kind of been pointing down as we head into the playoffs a little bit. In other words, we've peaked. Weeks 5 and 11 were, and even 8 were peakish, and they had some great weeks. So I'm wondering for props or Vegas or anything happening, and we'll have more time. And so part of this is I just have to get it out here for you and I to look at, and the few people that are paying attention to us, and the rest of them, they don't even know we exist. So that's fine. They can be asleep. But I'm just wondering for, lineups, anything like this. In other words, do you really start maybe getting aggressive in midseason? In other words, I'm curious if we had the last 10 years, what would be this trend? What would be each year's trend and compare? So there's the first thing, and then I've got some other stuff. So what you think?
Okay, so I do think this is how an NFL season works. And many, many years ago, not on fantasy scoring, but on point scoring
Yeah.
for I was involved in a contest of predicting winners,
Mm-hmm.
and we got a point for picking the winner of the game.
Yeah.
We got a point for the picking the right point spread, and then a
Right.
point for over under. So you got 3 points per game was your best score. If you're right on all. So I did a research of scoring, and this dates back to the 90s. Okay, but I did a 5 year study, and the trends were very, very similar to here, where weeks 5 and 11 are just outliers. So is week 6. Okay. So you got 3 out of the 13 weeks that are just not going according to plan, which is exactly what happened with my study. What I came to the conclusion of is that this whole concept that defenses have an edge early in the season and that it takes longer to get an offense meshing is really true. So scoring is down first few weeks. Teams are just, and especially now that you don't have preseason games that the starters are playing in, I would imagine that this is causing even more of this to be true. And what I saw was about week 6 to 10, we're always sort of, that was the prime time scoring, okay? And then it tailed off. And I thought, maybe there's two reasons for things to go south in the way of scoring. And it's injuries. Your starters start wearing down and the replacements aren't as good. So scoring goes down. Plus, the weather starts getting to be more of a factor. You historically, at all NFL venues that are outdoors, have more wind in the second half of the season, and especially the last third of the season. You have more inclement weather, just wind. From wind alone, you have more wind problems in that last third of the season. So this chart is exactly in line with what I think is really happens in teams get off to a slow start. How long have we heard that one? Well, their offense is just off to a slow start.
Yeah.
Okay. And then at the end of the season, it makes sense to drop as well because of weather, but also injuries. I think that's a pattern that's going to hold.
Okay. So this then, I get a little deep, start going a little, drilling down a little bit. I looked at the top 25% scoring teams, the bottom, and marked the numbers, just the numbers. So the red would be the bottom, the blue would be the top. Look at week one. Looks like a fish, by the way, the trend lines. And notice they're coming together week 13. So there is some week two, there was, the bad was, still above the good. Week three, they tied. Week four is a little bit bad. Week 5 and 6 flip flop, but weeks 7, 8, 9, and 11, and really 10 and 12 are the same. So pretty much they're closer together, or the high guys, or there's more of them going down. And so that was interesting here, Dennis. And that data, so this is the graph, and that data is this data.
So explain to me what I'm seeing on that graph again.
Okay, so I'll do it this way. Week one, if you count the red and give it a number, okay, that's 13.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Look at green, 3. 13 and 3, or it's close to 2. Maybe it's 2. I may have messed up. Sometimes I can't count. I may have missed one. So this is me just quickly counting the green and the red.
Gotcha.
And assigning, and so I called it the high and the low, and then did a trend line. So each week, so what I did was I looked over 13 weeks and asked the top 25 scoring PPR per snap and the bottom. So that means that you see the variation in the week, right? And so you're forcing the great weeks to pop up. Look at week 9.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of thing. Look at week 11 was pretty good. Okay, so that kind of thing. Look at last week, week 13, pretty good. So you can do that, and of course the overall season is over here. You can see the green teams. Okay, Baltimore, Buffalo, Cincinnati, Detroit, Green Bay, the Jets. How about that? Is a surprising team.
That is a surprise.
Isn't that interesting, though? People been down on the Jets, but overall, they've been in the top 25% across the 13 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, Tampa Bay and Washington and the bad teams. Now, you can look at last 4 or 5 weeks and see who's been declining, who's been improving. So you get a snapshot coming into the playoffs. Look at Indianapolis. Last 2 weeks have been sucky for the team level. I'm not talking player, right? We all
Right.
know there can be a great player on a sucky team. But I just wanted to start kind of looking at the teams at this level here, Dennis. Just kind of having so this is some stuff and I'll update this next week. So we'll have some clarity, at least any kind of patterns, anything that's happening just for props, for lineups, and then let me any questions, and I'm going to show you a little deeper still. I had time to run some positional data like this.
Yeah, I like this snapshot look.
Yeah, well,
Because
it's
when you're looking at
landscapes,
when
Dennis.
you're looking at 25%, and so on this chart here that you're showing here,
Yeah,
it shows again early in the season when scoring is down,
yeah,
it makes sense that there's more low to high,
yeah. Well, there's more
variance.
sucky teams than the better teams.
But what really impresses me is that by the time you get into the meat and potatoes of the season, once you're into that week 5,
Yeah, it's pretty
from
much level.
from week 5 to week 13,
Yeah.
it closes in with a few exceptions. But what you see is you still, from week 5 to 13, you had 8 where the high was above, like the good teams were above the bad teams.
Yes.
8 out of 13 weeks, and in the first 4 weeks, all minus. So that's an interesting
Yeah.
comparison, if you will, to what's going on here. In that again, it's it it's one of those patterns, and this is back to meteorology thinking. Okay, it's one of these patterns that makes sense in the scheme of how a season develops. We know because we've watched football how many early season games do we see the quarterback and the wide receiver, miss on a play, and they're just not on the same page yet, the announcer says. And you see it in every sport. I mean, I called 2 basketball games last night, high school basketball games. It was their second or third games of the season for these teams.
Yeah.
You could tell which teams had run harder in practice and scrimmaged harder in practice,
Yeah.
because despite the lack of time together yet,
Mm-hmm.
they looked like they were better than the poorer coached teams. And if you look at this, I mean, look at the teams that came out hot: Buffalo, Indy, New
Cincinnati
Orleans.
really came in hot.
Yeah, Cincinnati, they were 4 out of the first 5 weeks they were humming. So
Yep.
that that is interesting.
Yep.
It's, is this, do the better quarterbacks do that more often than the lesser quarterback? I mean,
Yeah. So,
there's a lot of questions that
yeah.
deeper research, but I love this way of looking at the data.
And let me. So now we can. No, John, that wasn't it. Sorry. I was trying to share, and I hadn't made the figures yet for this, but I'll show you. So this is the quarterback scoring. So then I drilled down a little deeper. And so now we can look at the quarterback. And I haven't done the highs and lows and drafted that. So again, you see that I'm going to look at the whole season. And for me, I'm just wondering in my losing teams versus winning teams, and just
Oh, yeah.
another way, in my drafting, was there, I don't know, in other words, people always say, well, I really came on late. And there's this, I know the bye weeks and these kind of things. And I don't know really what I'm even thinking. I'm just wondering, is there some way to use this to help us draft in August? And I don't know the answer to that at all. But hey, beat me a dog. Uh, I'm wondering. So here's the quarterbacks. You can look at the highs and the lows, and you can look who's come on recently. Look at Baltimore. Weeks, 10 to 13, hot. Look at Atlanta. Cousins. Oh boy, he's cold.
Oh,
Dennis.
yeah. He's been awful.
I don't know if I could ever start him in the playoffs. You
No.
see, I started wondering, Burrow seems okay. Even Caleb Williams is coming on. Look at this
Oh,
last
yeah.
two
He's gotten
weeks.
hot. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yep.
I'm just trying to get these little mini, patterns here to see, if as in we'll look back and just kind of, is there some predictability here, to that, Love has been, see, did he play week 12? Did Love play or was
Oh,
he
yeah.
out?
Yep. He had a bad game, though.
Boy, he did,
That was
didn't
that
he?
snowstorm game
Oh, okay. Well,
or
there it is. So if you
the
throw
rain
that
game,
out,
bad weather game.
yeah. So I think Love is, okay. I'll play him except in a snowstorm.
Yeah.
Richardson has come on the last couple, so maybe he has kicked it. Look at
Well,
Carolina. I
look at
mean,
look at Chicago.
yeah,
Week 11 was the first week
that he did
that they
something.
changed offensive coordinators.
There it is. And look, bam.
That is incredible.
Yeah, catching that pattern. And then of course, Dennis, I can look at running backs. So now we can look at uh overall patterns, these mini patterns here and see the type. Well, as the quarterback for Chicago week 11, what was the running backs doing? Not, not doing a lot. What about the tight end Chicago? Nope. What about the wide receiver Chicago? Better, better, but nothing. It looks like it's the quarterback play.
Yeah.
It's hey. So I'm just, you see what I'm trying to do. Look at Detroit running back. Oh my God, Dennis. His Knuckles and Sonic. Look at that.
Oh man.
Look
Yeah.
at that. And that,
Boy, they haven't had a single bad week all
no,
year.
they have not. And, Tampa Bay has had one bad week. So again, is this something we could use for, uh, drafting? And so I wonder, is there a relationship between a pattern of a quarterback and a team's running back just at this level and the tight ends and trying to put it all together team by team. So I could probably sort this by team and then look at the highs and the lows, that kind of thing. So I may get around to doing this. I'm probably not going to do that till after the season, but I just wanted to throw this out just because I haven't seen any of this. Everybody's so focused. I think they missed the boat to inspire deeper thinking, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. I think the science of all this and thinking about different ways of looking at the data pattern analysis, you've got to do things different. Everybody's looking at points per game, total points, what happened last week. I just don't. I don't want to do what everybody else is doing because I'll end up like everybody else, fighting for average. I do not want to fight for average. I either want to be, tear their butt up, or I just want to, okay, injuries, whatever got me. I don't want to have to fight for average. I want to be crushing them or not. So
And
anyway, yeah, go ahead.
and here's where you do gain an advantage with knowledge. Okay. I've heard so many times people say, well, everybody starts the season and, they each have 1/12 of a chance to win. They have, they have 50% chance of making the playoffs. And I look at that and I say, no, that's not true. That is not true. Because your aptitude at fantasy football will start your level of outcome at a higher level. So, in other words, if you're 80% smarter, you're on that 80% curve, only 20% of the people in fantasy football are smarter than you. Okay. You're not starting at the 50% line for making the playoffs. Your ability to make the playoffs is skewed. You're going to make the playoffs 8 out of 10 teams. So now injuries need to really hurt you, and bad roster management, bad roster design has to hurt you more in order for you not to make the playoffs than somebody who's just the most average player on the planet. For those average players, luck comes into play a lot more. But if you are starting out with an 80% chance of making the playoffs instead of a 50% chance, I can withstand some problems. And I've got good roster management, and I've backed things up properly. Now some of those injuries don't hurt me at all. In fact, maybe I injure my way into a better player.
Yeah,
and end up doing better on the season. But I really like this way of looking at the data because we can see some trends. We could see some weeks where maybe we throw that week out because it was such the aberration. And that's where looking at this data and combining weather with it, my weather notes on games that are questionable. And again, here's the thing with weather in fantasy football. It won't always impact things. All it does is impact the level of uncertainty. And what you want to do in fantasy football is limit your layers of uncertainty. Injuries are a layer of uncertainty. Weather is defensive, the defense against position data. All of these things add risk or they reduce risk. And in fantasy football, the more you can reduce risk, the better likelihood you'll have for outcomes. I was offered a trade today in one of my dynasty teams where I'm doing well. I'm not rocking it. I'm like third best in points. I'm solid. I've got a great lineup of running backs, decent quarterbacks. I'll be fine at tight end. My wide receivers are not the greatest. And I was offered Calvin Ridley. And I looked at Calvin Ridley's stats, and like 7 out of 12 games, he's failed to make double digits in points.
That's not good.
That's awful. And I said, no, what you're asking for this player, I don't want him. I don't think I can put him in my lineup. And I was told I was crazy. And I'm like, fine, I'm crazy. I don't know if I can get him in my lineup. If he's missing double-digit points 7 out of 12 games, I don't want to rely on a guy like that. in the playoffs. I don't want a lot of spike weeks in the playoffs. I want a guy that's going to give me 15 points with regularity. If I can get 15 points with regularity out of a good portion of my lineup, somebody will blow up and have a great game.
Yep.
And somebody will have a slightly below normal game. Maybe he's 9 or 10 points instead of 15. But if you have these high, inconsistent guys, yeah, I don't want 7 of those on my team. I don't want 7 boom bust cycles because each one of the bust cycles can kill your team.
Yeah. In
I want consistency. And sometimes the most consistent guys also are the big upsell guys, the big weak guys. Like Jamar Chase has been bulletproof this year. He's had great week in, week out performance. He's one of the more consistent guys out there, yet he also gives you those spike weeks. So his bad week is better than some guys' good weeks. And that's the kind of player you want to surround yourself with for the fantasy football playoffs. You don't want uncertainty. Uncertainty is not your friend in the fantasy football playoffs. But it's just amazing that a lot of people, if they're just looking at averages, and I was told, since whatever changed, I guess the trade of a player, he's averaged 12.9 points a game. And I was like, great. He had one 25-point game. You're looking at a 4-game sample. That tells me 3 out of the 4 games he hurt my team.
That's
one week.
I would call that a 25% calm. And those are wide receiver 3s
or
4s.
Yeah.
So he's trading you a wide receiver 3-4. That's how I would come back and say that.
And wanted a 2nd-round draft pick for it for this season.
Yeah, and see, I don't know enough of.
And
that sounds low.
Yeah, it to me it was just sort of the deal where I didn't want to go for a 2nd-round pick. I don't mind trading for age because he's also 29 years old.
Yeah,
and also what factored into this trade for me, I've got 2. I got Brandon Ayuk and Stephon Diggs on IR, so they will be in my starting lineup next year along with Garrett Wilson. Yep. So those are my 3 wide receivers. We start 3 wide receivers
for Ridley. Yeah,
so
let me tell you this: I would say I can find another Ridley on a bye week.
Yeah, and I took a shot and I said, okay, you know what? 2 3rd-round picks. That's what he's worth to me. And he turned me down. So I offered him a 2nd-round pick 2 years from now.
Yeah.
And if he takes that, great. Then I'll have Ridley and I'll decide whether I want to put him in the starting lineup for a couple weeks. I've got Elijah Moore is the other guy and Xavier Worthy, who I think Worthy's going to be good down the stretch.
Yeah.
And then I got Garrett Wilson. I don't have to worry about the flex positions because I've got more running backs than I know what to do with.
Yep.
And so I'll be fine there. But the whole point is, if I look at this type of data that you presented, I can see what the trend for the team was. And if the trend for the team is bad right now, and we know that traditionally scoring does go down at the end of the year. If scoring goes down and you get a team that's already trending down, that's not kind of the team that I want to be grabbing starters off of for the fantasy football playoffs. Nope. But he was worth a later pick to me, a less valuable pick to me. Because next year in the 2nd round, I'm going to have a shot at a wide receiver or a tight end or a running back, or maybe even a quarterback that will be better down the road because Ridley won't even come close to making my starting lineup next year except during bye weeks. And
Yeah.
but that's how you have to factor in stuff. But data like this really helps you make those informed decisions.
Well, I just wanted to, for my knowledge, uh, just just kind of so Dennis, I literally did it because you said you were going to be a little bit late today. So I said, well, let me do this little quick and dirty thing, and throw some data together. Dennis loves data, so
Oh
there you
yeah.
go. And I'll probably put it out on our site, maybe. Or I'm trying to. I got, like I said, the big question: is any of this useful for next year's draft? I understand you can say, well, maybe for the playoffs, and I'm going to think about that and probably really come back and redo this for include week 14 and then start thinking a little bit. But anyway, that's all I did. I just wanted to show you some thinking. I've never seen anything like that. And, I don't know. A lot more questions than answers, but that's what I'll be doing off season, that kind of stuff, thinking of things like that. Besides
No.
all the other stuff to do. Yeah, because I do certain things every year. I add to the database and then go back through it. Look at my age. Every year I look at age and position, and I just have another years of data to track that, that kind of thing. So rookies versus year one, two, is having a great rookie year, is that predictive 2, 3 years out? I've done that.
Yeah.
Or having a bad rookie year but a good second year, is that predictive? And I've already done those lessons. Y'all can go find that. And especially for dynasty, it's funny, a lot of the stuff I always feel like it's probably better for dynasty than for redraft folks like me. But anyway, I'll be updating all that as well. But the
Well, and I
first
made
thing I'm going to do, I'm going to track our methods for consistency. I would love to get a slice of, a taste of, which one was better for us, or which ones were best for certain positions. I really don't know what I'm going to see. I look forward to digging into that in, like, January, February. I'll start that work after 18 weeks, and I'm looking forward to all that.
Yeah, and that's actually a very enjoyable part of the season for both of us.
Yeah.
I love setting lineups and doing the waivers and doing all that. Love draft season, obviously. Love trying to outsmart people and to come
Sure.
up with a great team and all that kind of stuff. But there's something so perfect about the lulls in the off season
Yep.
that give you time to look at data in new ways and
Yep.
to see relationships. I mean, one of the things I'm going to be doing this year, once I get caught up with the basics and any of the research projects that are sort of at the top of the list,
Yeah.
once I'm exhausted all of that stuff, and before I get ready for the NFL draft and all of my dynasty drafts, I'll be looking back even further
Yeah.
to see how some of my metrics worked. I'm going to look and see if you equate the best index to a 17-week season, you'd remove injuries. Is that predictive of the future?
Right.
You know, just all of these kinds of things, that philosophy things in fantasy football. I want to look at roster construction again. There's so many things that you don't get a chance to do during the regular season because you're just too doggone busy.
Yeah, I've
And
got to set waivers for like 17 teams tonight out of my 41. I've uh, been working on that. Actually, we probably should start the show, and because I got a few things to talk about on my waivers,
all
some
right,
things I'm
well
looking
let's
at.
Let's load things up and get rolling on the real show. How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the Science of Fantasy Football. Why the Science of Fantasy Football? Well, you get a meteorologist and a biologist together. They're going to use a scientific method to dissect and to categorize all of these great statistics that we have in fantasy football. And here's the thing, folks. If you apply the scientific method the correct way, by letting the data guide you to the answers instead of cherry picking stats to find support for your ideas, you are going to be a smarter fantasy football player. And the professor and I are teaching you how to do just that. Joining me as he does each and every week, twice a week during the regular season, it is the professor. He's a real professor, folks. You can learn a lot from real professors. It's John Bush. John, last week of the regular season for fantasy football, the second bye-mageddon, and I can't believe I see people complaining as if they didn't know six teams were going to be out this week when they drafted their teams.
Yeah, well, the waivers are interesting. Everybody's talking about Garendo, Dennis, and everything's surprising to some folks, as you say. It's just like they wake up. It's Etch a Sketch. That's what I think. They just whatever. It's gone now. It's something new, and you can't be that way. You've got to be strategic in your thinking. And the playoffs are coming, folks. I know that may be a surprise. Week 15 for most of us will be, or not, but I have 41 leagues, so I'll be in some here. So that's the good news. When you played enough leagues, you're going to just accidentally fall into some. And so some I'm just spinning my wheels, but I want to play it out. I play to the whistle. I play spoiler. Whatever I can do, I'm going to do by the rules, and I don't quit. I don't pay money to quit, Dennis. And so I don't play the free leagues much. But anyway, waivers this week. Garendo's the hot topic. Patrick Taylor may be something. A little bird named Dennis told me about him, and they just got a practice guy or something they signed. I can't even pronounce his name.
Israel Aban Kanandi.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Israel. Israel will lead you to the promised land.
So that's what I saw that already. It's on Facebook and Twitter. So is that the one, forget Garendo, right? I'm supposed to go over here. But for $1, is Patrick Taylor, this other guy, worth a step, Dennis?
Yes, they are. And I will say this is that here's the advantage to playing a lot of dynasty leagues, okay?
Mm-hmm.
In dynasty leagues, you have to be thinking ahead a lot more. 2 weeks ago, I told our good friend John, who's actually going to be joining us on the Saturday podcast this week.
Yep.
I told him Sincere McCormick.
Yes.
And at the time, it was like, who?
Yeah.
For most people, he could be like the Zamir White of this season, where for the fantasy football playoffs, he is getting 15 touches a week and turns into something. If you get 15 touches a week, you're going to score points in fantasy football. Right. And that's, you have to be playing ahead of the game. So, in my leagues, I there were still some shares of Sincere that I didn't pick up that I was able to get this week before the news broke that the coach loved him last week. Mm-hmm. Well, Madison and White are are hurt. Amir Abdul, he knows what he's got in that guy. He's a good, dependable journeyman running back. Sincere McCormick went out there, and all of a sudden he's like, "Whoa, this kid's got some play
Juice.
to him." And that's what happens in football, folks, is people get opportunities. Look at Parker Washington as a wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. All of a sudden, Parker Washington is looking like he could be a thing. But that's how you have to play fantasy football. You need to be thinking ahead. For instance, we were telling everybody last week to make sure that on Saturday waivers,
Yep.
you are covered for week 14.
Yes, we did.
Set your lineups, look ahead a week. What am I going to need? Am I going to need a backup tight end? Is my tight end, what if? Play the what if games. What if my tight end gets hurt? What's available? Is what's available and how it could impact my team more valuable than the last guy on my bench? Oh, pet peeve, though. Pet peeve time for fantasy football for typical redraft short bench leagues. Saw so many posts this week. Who should I drop to pick up an additional kicker? My guy's on bye. And my answer to everyone was drop your damn kicker.
Drop your damn kicker.
Trade kickers. Don't give up a running back who could emerge as something. Don't take your handcuff away from you because you've got the top ranked kicker and now he's going to be on bye and you don't want to give him up. You don't want to risk losing him. Well, the gap between the best kicker in points per week and the 16th place guy that you'll always be able to get off of streaming by playing the best defensive matchup for a kicker who is available. That difference is 2 or 3 points a week on average. The difference between having a viable running back and nobody can be a 15 to 20 point difference. You just, no, don't worry about hanging on to a kicker or a second defense. Streaming both positions will work just fine for you, and you might actually catch a matchup that's better. But the roster management, the mismanagement in fantasy football costs people more leagues than anything else. And I've had my share of mismanagement this year with our dynasty team in FPPC. I'm used to having taxi squads where I can bury rookie running backs on my taxi squad and not bring them in until I've got an IR squad of injured guys. And if I need to start him, I bring him off the taxi squad. Now I can't put him back on the taxi. He's on my active roster, but I only did it for a week that I was putting him in the starting lineup. Wasn't doing it out of speculation that he might be a starter. It was, I need a starter. Okay. What do I got on the taxi squad? Bucky Irving on a few teams where I was really deep at running back started the season on the taxi squad. By about week 5 or 6, he was in my starting lineup every week. But the key is you're going to mismanage. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to make logical decisions, and they're going to turn out to be illogical. In our dynasty league, I drafted so great with rookie running backs this year. And when we had problems with injuries, and in FPPC, a guy being out, you don't have the luxury of burying him in an IR spot and getting another guy. You got to carry him. You don't have IR spots in these leagues. You do in Dynasty, but you don't have a taxi squad. You don't have IR for out players. So you have to make decisions. I made the decision of cutting a couple of our rookies that didn't have an opportunity at that point, and I didn't get them back quick enough. And now they got the opportunities. But you could look at it and you go, oh, I screwed up. Yeah, I look at it that way, but I also look at it as, damn, I guess I'm pretty good at picking running backs for our dynasty team. So I'll do it again next year. But next year I'll cut the veterans. I won't cut I won't cut the rookies. In a lot of leagues that I play in, you can cut the rookies, like a lot of redraft leagues. You cut the rookie, you wait a week or two, you pick them back up, and you can get them back on your roster. No harm, no foul. Nobody pays attention. These FPPC sharks are really good players.
Yep.
But Professor, today, my gripe of the week today has to do, and I'm revisiting this one again. It's exotic statistics and people being so adamant that one exotic stat, that's all they need. They need, EPA, or they need air yards, or they need all of these exotic statistics. And they're all good to factor into the equation. But you should never, ever look at one stat and say, that's all I need in fantasy football, because you'll get burned. For instance, I saw a guy, oh, this is it. EPA, this estimated points, thing, expected points above average or whatever it is. And they calculate it based on how many yards somebody gets first down. Did they get 50% of the needed yards for a first down, or did they not? And then it's, different percentage of each down and distance, or each down, based on the distance. And I'm like, why is that being factored in for fantasy football? What is that? What advantage is that giving you in fantasy football versus, how about points per snap, PPR points per snap, which you're working on? Or my MVP index, which grades how a player does on a weekly basis. But even that, Professor, we don't look at one of our statistics that we use and justify every decision we make on just that one statistic. If you fall in love with one exotic stat and that's all you follow. And I asked one of the guys one time, was using one of the exotic stats as air yards. So who are the guys you hit on last year? And he was quick to brag about those. And I said, okay, could you show me the top 20 from last year? And he was very reluctant to do it. When I found the top 20 for air yards, I figured out why. He had 3 great hits using air yards. There were 10 completely botched decisions that you would have made based on that. How you doing, Noah? Noah's coming in to visit me. My grandson just said hi. But
Hello.
out of those 20 guys in the top 20, 3 were hits, 10 were complete busts, and 7 they did good, but they weren't out of this world. If you are missing 10 for every 3 you hit on a stat, that's not serving you well. But no exotic stat, no single statistical tool should be used by itself to come up with a ranking, whether it's who I'm playing this week or who I'm drafting. You need to look at more layers of data and not just one exotic stat.
When you said that, I'm reminded of reference class forecasting. In other words, if you took 10 exotic stats, what's the expectation? In other words, how does air yards compare to the EPA or whatever?
Yes.
That kind of thing. In other words, are they about the same average? So, that kind of thing. Uh, there's a lot of work that needs to be done before you land on something. And maybe it's a percentage of EPA and air yards. I don't know. Maybe it's only for tight ends that works, or whatever. I don't know or maybe in home games, or maybe the position of the running back. He's on one side of the quarterback sometimes or on the other. I don't know. I mean, I can see a lot of variables that I would like to think about. If I was relying on one stat, I'd have to be pretty sure about it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, first of all, I don't think one statistic can tell you what is going on. And maybe that is again a bias by what forecasting I've done in the past. Okay. But even forecasting that I just dabble around the edges on, for instance, every week I do an interview at the radio station with a grain marketing expert. And when I talk to that grain marketing expert, they talk about the news headlines that might be changing the supply or the demand for a particular crop. They talk about moving averages. They talk about they're not just talking about one thing. They look at 5 or 6 different layers of data to give advice to their clients. In weather forecasting, I have to look at the atmosphere from the ground up, all the way up to about 500 millibars, about 15,000, 18,000 feet in the atmosphere. And then even higher than that to get the big picture of how things are going to move. And then you look at surface data, radar data. You layer different things, and each type of weather event has its own set of 8 to 10 to 12 tools that you use. For hurricane forecasting, I've shown you 51 different models.
Spaghetti models.
Going in,
You
yeah,
showed me
spaghetti
those.
model
It's
charts.
like, goodness, there's a lot of. There's some outliers, Dennis. I mean, the gyrations. I mean, some are just like,
oh, they're
if the
crazy.
storm does that, that's going to be the craziest situation that's ever been. I mean, it show it going one way, then just veering completely opposite. It's like going backtracking, and it's just like, that's crazy. Even
And
I know that's crazy.
it is crazy, but that's like giving a forecast for a 45-point game in fantasy football and hitting it.
Yeah.
You're going to miss so many more than you're going to hit. And I'm not ripping on these. I'm not saying air yards is trash. I'm not saying EPA or anything else is trash. Okay. I'm not saying that. They're each interesting statistical tools. But so are my MVP index. So is my best index. So is my weekly value. So is snaps or points per snap data. So are trends. Is this team rising or falling? Who are they playing? What are the conditions? What are they, what did they do last week? Do they now have a short week? I mean, if you just look at one piece of data, even if all I did was base all my decisions off of your scaled power rankings and nothing else, Professor, I'd hit quite a few predictions on who's going to win the game, but I'd miss quite a few. If you layer the data, it's like trying to put one piece of a jigsaw puzzle on the table without looking at the box. and to figure out what it is. Each piece you put together, you have a better idea of what that puzzle is. What is this picture I'm looking at? And that's the same thing in fantasy football. It's not about finding the one perfect stat. It's understanding the strengths and weaknesses of every stat that you look at. And when I look at the stuff that I've developed, I can tell you what the weaknesses are, what my thought, what my hypothesis of the weaknesses. Where is this going to beat me? And then when it comes to how good it is, I hand the data over to you and let you do the analysis. Now it's an independent person doing the analysis, because Lord knows you're not going to make my stuff look good. You're going to be honest with your approach. That's the scientific method.
In fact, we want to prove things false.
Yes.
Right? Because we get rid of them and move on to something else. It's like, if you're hunting for minerals or something, they do test wells. If it doesn't work, you move on. I mean, why would you spend all your time where there's nothing there? You just don't do that.
But I think people see one or two things. Like, my favorite is every year somebody will have a new rookie model. I looked at 27 factors, and this is what I came up with. So it's a good sound reasoning. They looked at the last 2 or 3 drafts, came up with the best players. And even then, the best players, are those the best players that hit in year 1? Okay. Well, Patrick Mahomes had almost zero fantasy points his first season. Was he a bust? No, he didn't get on the field until the last game of the season. And then he came out his rookie year, his first year, and was lights out. But if you look at his rookie year, he would have been a bust. So I look at that whole idea of bust over a 3-year period. What did the guy do over 3 years? And I'm not talking average over 3 years. I'm saying at any point in those 3 years, was he a top 15 player at his position? If so, man, that guy was pretty damn good. Yep. And I might even go a little deeper. I might say top 15 quarterback, top 30 running back, top 30 wide receiver, and maybe top 10, top 15 tight end. Did he hit that mark in any of those first 3 seasons? Yes. Okay, he wasn't a bust. Did he hit him 2 out of 3? Oh, man, now he's even better. Did he hit them all 3? Well, that's a superstar. That's the guy that I'd love to have more of him. But when I see people go back, and they'll go back like 3 years. Oh, how long have you been doing this? Well, this is, my 3rd year. I base it on 3 years of data. Okay. So how many misses have you had? I love hearing how many hits, but how many misses did you have? And if you can't outperform draft capital, why are you wasting your time? I have played with a lot of different ways of looking at college stats. The best one that I ever came up with, professors, is actually pretty simple. 5-star recruits heading into college. They got a pretty good track record in the pros. That doesn't mean the 3-star guys don't occasionally hit, but the 5-star guys usually are pretty darn good. And sometimes they don't have the best start to their college season. Sometimes they're not even all that great in college because they're stuck behind somebody for 3 years. And they only get 1 year to shine. But man, they were a 5-star recruit at one time. They were one of the best in their class coming out of high school. That works. Does it work all the time? No. The one thing that works better than anything else I've tried is draft capital. So I don't bother. I figured the NFL teams kind of know what they're doing. So I factor draft capital in. Yeah, I've seen some of these players play. I watch the combine. I'll take notes on guys that go a little bit later in the draft, like Pacheco. Loved his combine. Loved watching him beat up on my Purdue Boilermakers when he was at Rutgers. I was like, that guy's pretty darn good. I'm going to keep an eye on him when he comes into the pros. And then he went 7th round. I'm like, oh, maybe he isn't all that great. He ended up being pretty darn good. So draft capital alone doesn't work either, but it does pretty darn good if you know how to look at it. But just these exotic stats on their own, any one thing on its own is not worth gambling on.
I will say, as a caveat, that if there's some weird stat and it sounds, well, it's interesting, I hadn't thought about, I would look at the highs and lows, the extremes, and just, is it doing something surprising? It's like, why are they pointing this? What am I missing? In other words, it just makes me want to go digging deeper. And that's the level I would do, folks, when you haven't tested some of these things. I wouldn't pay for them, but if you can get them for free and it just helps you, they call hey, this guy's in the top 10 of this stat. Okay, well, I hadn't thought about it, or that I can get him cheap off waivers, or
Yes.
worth a buck or two. Okay, maybe that kind of, that's the level I would handle it until I tested it myself. So the good news with Dennis and I, we tested ourselves, and then we use each other to bounce ideas off. I mean, it's, I wish we had peer review, Dennis. I wish we did have a fantasy football informatics society that we could write a
Oh,
paper
yeah.
together,
Yeah. Yep.
submit it to a group of editors and experts, and then they could come back and say, yeah, we like this part, but this other part sucks, or did you think about that? They would critique it, and then we would come back and retool it and send it back, and okay, it gets accepted because you found some things we hadn't thought about. We don't have that system in fantasy football. We have Twitter, Dennis. We have
Yes.
goobers and gomers on Twitter in their mom's basement. That's what we got. Okay,
Yeah.
we don't know who these people are.
And here's what you need in any model. And I don't care what you're trying to predict. Okay. You got to look back, make your choices, and see how you did.
You could do it
If
that way.
if the past 5 years, let me put it this way: if I were to look at statistical tools, I would look back 5 years and see how they predicted year 6
Yep.
and year 7 and year 8. Like
Yep.
you
Yep.
you
Done that.
look at the different predictive metrics in weather forecasting. That's how you develop a weather model. You have
Yep.
theories, you have solutions for equations, you throw it all into the computer and you say, okay, let's see how it does. If it does well, now you got a new tool. If it doesn't do well, you got problems. One of the reasons why I'm so skeptical on climate change being the end of the world, like so many want to say, is there is not a single climate prediction model that's been developed yet, Professor, that can look at 100 years ago and, say take 50 years from 100 years ago and figure out what happened the next 50 years. Their hit ratio on that is horrible. So if you can't take past data and have it tell you what happened all in the past, then you're taking data from today and trying to predict 40 years out. It's probably not going to work. Maybe it will. But if you can't predict what's already happened with past data, you're looking at the data wrong, or maybe it can't be predicted with enough accuracy to be really valuable. And in fantasy football, here's the joy of it all, Professor. You don't have to be perfect.
Nope.
You got to be better than consensus on players, and then have a good roster build and roster strategy and good waiver strategies. And you just have to be better than consensus at any one of those things that go into building a good fantasy football team. So if you start out with player analysis based on good stats, properly used statistics, and you are 30% better than consensus, you're going to win a lot of money in fantasy football.
I agree. And just say when people are doing studies, they'll actually gather the data and split it in two randomly, and do
Yes.
one as a training, and the other one, then the model is trained on half the data, and then it's applied to the test half to see does it work. So you're not tricking yourself here. So
Yes.
you got to randomly, you can't go in there and, hey, that looks interesting, let me throw it over here. No, no, no. You just got to randomly assign it, split it in two. Does one side predict the other? And that's the training model people do for that. But anyway, Dennis, we got a game tomorrow, so we're going down the rabbit hole, and
It is quite a good game,
yeah,
Professor. I
yeah, yeah.
This is
Oh,
an
yeah, we do.
intriguing one.
So I do have my power rankings. I'll post up again. This is for week 14. This is kind of just a prediction that I do. More than anything else, this is an overall team level. Okay, I'm not looking at one player. I'm just kind of thinking about, some of these make sense, some don't. And if it doesn't make sense to you, then maybe you're right, maybe I'm right, but think about it. What's why is oh, Professor thinks the Giants are really sucky this week, or Carolina a little bit thin. What's going on? Is he a goof, or is there something there I'm not thinking about? So I would use this to inspire deeper thinking, and your lineups and your flexes and whatnot. I would have a hard time with teams that are suspicious in their in the deep flex kind of thing. So that's, if nothing else, use that. And I also then have efficiency that looks last 3 weeks. So I look at this week prediction kind of forward, and then I'm looking backward the last 3 weeks. And Denver, Chargers, Miami, Houston, Tennessee, the Jets, Carolina have been hot the last 3 weeks. My efficiency looks at points scored, real points, defense and offense, looks at the offensive yards uh, uh, per game, and then this is all tied to seconds per play. So I trick all that together in a gumbo and look at kind of who's putting real points and yards per second. So who's scoring and doing stuff quick. And the slow ones, a lot more. Atlanta's at the bottom, Dennis. Look at that, minus 200
Wow.
versus Denver plus 164. Big difference. Cousins, the wheels have come off Atlanta overall, right?
Oh yeah.
I know Bijan, and again, folks, this is team level. So it just, there can be a hero in a burning house, but just be aware the house is burning, and it's probably going to affect some of the other players. So just be cautious here. with these players. And again, this is offense only. There is some defense with points scored and whatnot, but just, it's the offense kind of thing. And so the game then, Dennis, is Detroit and Green Bay, 51.5. That is the highest predictive over under for the week, Dennis. They claim this Thursday, which I traditionally hate, is going to be the best game of the week. So I'm always sad when it's a foreign game, best game of the week, or, it's playing in, wherever, some island somewhere, whatever they, on a floating, aircraft carrier. I don't know what they're going to do next, some circus tent. I don't know. Whatever they're doing, dude. It's crazy. And anyway, Detroit versus Green Bay. Detroit's the favorite, 3.5 points. Detroit is at home. Notice the spreads. They say it gives you a 3-point advantage, according to old wives' tales from the Vegas here versus Green Bay. Green Bay's definitely a dynamic team. Jordan Love, of course, we know Detroit's been kicking butt. Let me tell you, these DAPs pretty lean, Dennis, on both sides. If you just looked at the DAP, it's like, okay, Laporta has an opportunity and Green Bay's wide receivers have an opportunity. But the running backs for Green Bay, and there's some injuries there, be aware. I think in Jacobs hurting a little bit. Is he plays for Green Bay, doesn't he? Jacobs?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I think he's let's see. Yeah, Jacobs. I got him pretty high at 85, so a low end RB1, but I'm worried. If he's shanky there, then so is it Chris Brooks or is it Wilson?
Yep. It would probably be a mix of Brooks and Wilson,
Well,
but
I've got some of them sprinkled, ready to go off the bench if I've got to use them.
Yeah, they gave no designation to Jacobs after practice today.
Oh, so they're claiming he's not questionable anymore.
No, well, he got beat. I mean, it's week 14. There is no such thing as a healthy running back by week 14, unless he's been not playing all season. But no injury designation, so he's expected to go on Thursday.
I mean, Detroit seems to have. Once again, Detroit, and I was looking at my PPR scoring, Dennis, and their wide receivers and the quarterback play and the team level play. Everything's been working. They're very dynamic with Montgomery and Gibbs, and then Sun God and whatnot. It's like if you stop here, they're going over there. It's hard to. It's kind of like you got 3 mice and 1 cat. It's kind of hard to get all the mice at one time. I mean, the cat's got paws, but it seems like there's going to be a mouse loose somewhere. And Detroit reminds me of that. A defense can try to do the Belichick and take somebody out, but so far they have not taken out Sonic and Knuckles there. And the Sun God's been taken out more than they have. I wouldn't play the defense or the kickers, or be cautious if you're streaming. I'd look elsewhere. I think there's some other situations there, but Laporta should have, an okay game. And Green Bay's wide receivers, Reed, Watson, Wicks, if he's out of protocol, the trouble with Green Bay is sometimes it's been one of these other games and the other ones I haven't gone through. Detroit has been declining in the last 3 compared to what they've been doing. And again, it's a little misleading, but I look at the last 3 games and they've been closer than you would think. And Dennis, their home away has been completely flipped this year. Now we have arrived at where they love the away games better.
Wow.
How about that? And they're at home.
And it's all the running. It's all the rushing game too, because we're still not seeing Goff's numbers do well on the road, but very interesting.
Yeah. So away, it's +9 rushing, -14 passing. But at home, it's all about the pass, rushing a little less. So Green Bay has been improving. Green Bay away loves to rush, doesn't love the pass. And that's exactly opposite what Detroit's defense. So Green Bay is going to have to break their tendencies. And so I keep finding myself every week, Dennis, saying that word, break their tendencies. We definitely need to put this in our ideas to try to, we look at the DAPS, but I'm trying to think higher level, like a landscape. And you're trying to put down these tendencies of rushing and passing. So what happens when the defense breaks the trend? I think a good team can survive. I think Green Bay can still do it, but maybe some weaker teams can't. Maybe, you combine with, say, their total points or success, win loss. Maybe it's really dramatic, or maybe Vegas tells us something about over under. In other words, if the over under was 40 and a team was going to have to break their trend, is that different than an over under 50 trying to break a trend? Because Vegas is saying they're going to do it. I mean, Vegas would tell me, if Vegas was in front, they would say, don't worry about it. Green Bay's dynamic. They're going to put up lots of points. So, I mean, that's a question I have more research, Dennis. I need interns. So anyway, that's the overall landscape. So what say you? What you think?
Well, here's an interesting addition to the studies that we need to do in the off season when it comes to these defense against position data. How much of this is influenced by a few key injuries? And it's going to be hard research to do.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very subjective type of look. We're going to have to look at, okay, these guys were hurt. These were injuries. And on this particular week with these guys out, was it more or less performance, by the opposing offense? And I say that because Detroit's going to be down 2 defensive linemen in this game for sure. They have also taken some injuries to the linebacker and the defensive backfield core as far as some of their depth pieces that come in during a game. So Detroit is beat up right now on defense, and they were beat by Chicago. Chicago had a beat with the exception of lousy coaching. Green Bay doesn't have a lousy coach.
Nope.
So I think those injuries showed up last week against Chicago. And yes, they were on a short week, and injuries on a short week going to hurt you a lot more than injuries after you've had another 10 days to get ready. But in this case, you only have 7 days. How crazy is this? They're playing 2 Thursday, both teams playing 2 Thursday games back to back. I don't think that's ever happened.
Nope.
That these guys are on perfect 7-day rest.
Yeah.
So that can't be factored in. We don't know. We've never seen this before. I've never seen a case of 2 teams after playing another game on Thursday night or Thursday the week before. So that we're entering new territory. But having said that, with the fact that Green Bay is improving on their efficiency while Detroit's going in the wrong direction, combined with the injuries, combined with the fact that Detroit was beaten by Chicago last week, they were let up off the mat by Chicago last week. I'm taking Green Bay in the 3.5 this week, but I don't like the over-under. I would think it'll trend under, but this is how I see the game going. first of all, with the injuries up front, Green Bay is able to at least run the ball a little bit. But their wide receivers are the strength of Green Bay. And the fact that they've got so many good wide receivers, you're not going to be able to cover them all. And
Jordan, 3 mice, 1 cat.
Yeah, Jordan Love has been great at finding the mouse that gets away.
That's what I'm thinking.
That's why I think Green Bay is in a position to pull off the upset here against Detroit. And, it'll be interesting, though. But being Thursday, which tends to be a little lower scoring, with the Detroit injuries, with the fact that if Green Bay can run the ball at all, they'll be wanting to run the ball. But even Green Bay's passing game, Professor, it's the death by 1,000 paper cuts type of attack where they use that short passing game so well that it's almost like having another running game. Like it eats clock because you don't have incomplete passes and you keep the sticks advancing. So unless Green Bay gets themselves in a bad situation where they cannot get, if they're on 3rd and 12s quite frequently, then Detroit's going to beat them because Detroit's offense is going to score 24 points. And now it's just a question, can Green Bay just kind of eke ahead and beat them? But the over-under, I like the under, but boy, it's tight. I would not bet the over-under here. I might take Green Bay and the money line if the odds are good enough. Let's see what the odds are right now on the money line. I might take that. Plus 158 on Green Bay. And it's actually been going up. I'd probably take that.
Nice. Bet it all. Wheel it up.
And one advice I will give, I don't care about these DAPs. I'm playing everybody. I can't get enough players from this game in because even if it is slightly under, that's still going to be one of the better scoring games of the week. So I will be playing both Detroit wide receivers. I'll be playing both Detroit running backs. Probably playing Goff at home. I'm definitely playing Jordan Love. Yeah. And I'm probably playing Reed and Dobbs as the wide receivers, although Wicks and Watson might beat you.
Yep. What about Kraft? Kraft
I don't like because Dobbs is back. And when he's had his best weeks when one of their main wide receivers has been out.
Gotcha.
So I'm not crazy about Kraft. In a lot of leagues, I'll probably end up playing him because he's been pretty solid. But expect a game closer to 6-8 than 12-14.
Gotcha.
And I'm not crazy about Laporta in this game. I know he's got the above average DAP, but he has not been getting a lot of targets. And with Detroit having so many weapons,
would you play Goff as your quarterback?
I'll play Goff. I'll play Goff in this
Goff
one.
Versus Love. You had both of them.
If I had both of them, oh boy, I'd hope if I had both quarterbacks, I'd be hoping it's a super flex.
but say you don't, because I actually have a league. I've got them both.
Probably
they let me have. I think I got Love, and then Goff was hanging around like 10, 11, 12. I can't. Yeah. I got to take this.
No, I got a league like that myself, and I'm probably going to go with Love. And here's the reason. I'm probably
going with Love too.
And here's the reason why. If Green Bay wins this game, it's
by passing.
Love is going to have 2 touchdown passes. More likely.
And if they win, it'd be by running. Gibbs would get one. Montgomery would get one.
It could be either
Sun God might get one.
Sun God could get his touchdowns, but Sonic and Knuckles will get their touchdown. There's more likely that if Detroit wins, it's because their running attack just dominated the game.
Yep.
And if Green Bay wins, it's
It'll be
more likely that
Pass.
they pass. Even with the injuries up front,
Yeah.
Detroit's still got a decent defense. Like Detroit has been really good. So you take a couple of pieces away and you're not going to get to below average.
Yeah.
Okay. You're just not as elite. You're going to have just that extra second to get a pass off. You're going to have that extra yard that you're going to be able to get running. That's where I think this game gets decided. I'm looking forward to a good Thursday night football game. We haven't had good Thursday night football games all year long. We have had some games that were very entertaining. So I'm hoping for one more. So head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. You can check out my articles. You can check out the professor's data. I'm telling you, folks,
it's coming.
Put the data to work for you, and you will learn some cool things. And one thing we've learned, Professor, is it gets you thinking in a way that's slightly different, but successful. And that's the key that we are looking for in science, in fantasy football, by using the scientific method. And then head on back here on Saturday for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks. Okay, that was good. I'm gonna stop recording here because we did a good pre-show.
Yeah, lots of good pre-show.
Yeah, I'm gonna finish up that data and I guess put it out. I guess you build it up. I mean, it's just
I love that data.
Yeah,
I love
it
that
gives
data.
me something. Maybe I'll graph the position, the highs and lows for each week, and just see what the trends have been. Definitely tight ends have gone up for sure.
Oh God, yeah.
It was
tight ends are
so weird. Yeah,
and here's the weirdest part of all this stuff is, you look at this data and like Detroit, the efficiency data says that they're going downhill the last 3 weeks.
Yes,
that's relative to what
was they were
the
before.
Best in the league.
I know.
Yeah, and that's why I say, if these people that use this one
you got
source,
to understand where the data comes from, how you generate it, what is it really telling you?
Yeah.
It's telling me that it's a race for Detroit. They don't want to go below a certain level or they're not going to get to the Super Bowl.
No, you're right.
I think the thunder's booming in the background and they need to pay attention. And
well, we see this every year with a team that, the old adage, they peaked too early.
Yes.
I wonder if they peaked. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have a second peak again.
Right.
But they peaked way early this year. And I'm interested to see if they can get up to that second plateau. I mean, if you remember back 1 year ago, Kansas City was the laughing stock around Christmas time.
Yeah.
And then got to the playoffs and they were all world.
What the hell? Yeah.
How did they do that? I mean, was that a freakish thing, or was this all planned?
Deliberate, and it seems like it's going to happen again.
It's happening again, but the problem for the rest of the NFL is this year it's happening, and they're likely to have home field advantage all the way.
Yeah,
like last time they did it despite
not having
home field. They only had it for that Miami game, which might have been the best game to have it.
Yeah. Yes.
Because Miami can't handle the ice cold.
No.
And Miami was coming in hot.
Yeah.
Like they were peaking. And that, I think, gave the Chiefs a new level of confidence. But it's interesting because defensively they've played really good most of the year.
Yep.
They may have peaked defensively. They need to get that second peak, and I think with Amenahu coming back, that's going to help.
Good for them.
But ever since Jalen Watson went out, their cornerback, their star cornerback, they have not been as great. So
Yeah.
this week will be interesting for them against the Chargers. This is
Yeah,
going to be,
Chargers going to be a good game. We'll talk about that Saturday, I'm sure.
yeah. Oh yeah. If they win this game, the Chiefs win this game, they clinch the division.
Wow.
So that's huge to
Yeah,
be
well,
doing that. And man, I'd love to see Buffalo get handed a loss. That would
I
be
know you.
sweet.
Yeah, I can tell.
That
Okay,
would
I'm gonna
be
stop
sweet.
recording.